So with the city of the Jedis, when the ground beneath came up and buried basically the city, and then add 200,000 years, and that's what we're kind of digging in and trying to find stuff that has been obliterated through time. So there's something big that has taken place on this earth that we have yet have to face. So let me come back to the debunking aspect. Is common sense, have an opinion, yes. Can you do it better? So if you can't go on stage and you can perform that, let's say somebody watches somebody breakdancing and then they come to me and say, yeah, I can breakdance and I can battle, I got all these moves, and I say, show me. And when they go on stage and they can present that they can do it, then I accept their performance, and to a degree criticism, when it is constructive. I have no problem with constructive criticism. So the Wright brothers, who developed the plane heavier than air, were criticized and not funded by the US people, because the scientific society back then said planes flying motorized that are heavier than air will never fly. Not even to think about interstellar travel. Our formulas equate to what you're attempting is impossible. Back to the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers went to France. They had more of an open mind and said, okay, how much money do you need to build this device? And then let's see what it does. Okay, and this is where I think we still have to learn that principles, to leave ourselves open to make an investment. Yes, when we assess science, there are mistakes, there are theories, things work, things do not work, trial and error, but give people a chance to find their way. Allow them. Open your heart and relax. So the Wright brothers got the funding, built the planes. Of course, probably they failed 100 times, and the debunkers were probably sitting there, see, I told you. Yeah, see? They're failing. That's not helping anybody. Okay, that's my opinion. If they would help make the motors and fix the stuff that's broken and help to make that work, I would respect them more. So, always something has to resist. Jesus was crucified for being holy and performing miracles. We do it to our own prophets and to our own messiahs over and over and over. And this is where these people are. He who's free of sin may throw the first stone. Very powerful argument there, because nobody could throw anything, because we're all full of it. Nobody's innocent. Now here's the deal. Admittance also. Admit to who you are, and healing can actually commence. So, the project for the Wright brothers was funded. They built the plane. It flew. When they were successful, everybody wanted to invest and own, and look at the aviation industry right now. The biggest unfathomable dream the Wright brothers had actually came to fruition. And nobody talks about the debunkers. Einstein talks about gravitational waves, and the debunkers come in and say there's no such thing as gravitational waves. You're wrong. Well, 100 years later, we have found gravitational waves, but still, there are still skeptics saying, you know, we don't really know what that is that we found. And also, a funny thing that I have with a skeptic who wants to be a skeptic because it's his nature. Here's the thing. A science professor and teacher argued with me, saying, I said that EMF influences the cell structure in the body. So 5G coming, you know, but you better be aware, it's not going to make you healthy, it's actually going to make you sick. Science has proven that. And he said, I never heard of such thing, it's not in the scientific review, show me some proof. Then I showed him, I googled from the scientific review, which he wasn't aware, that they show the blood cells, the blood plasma under EMF, totally clotted up and knotted up and unhealthy. And then in a couple of weeks in nature or by the beach, the blood of a human, totally aligned, totally fluffy, all the particles, everything, blood plasma, everything moves healthy. And he says, he never heard of that, he's never seen it, and you can't believe anything that's written. the same person that pointed out it needs to be in a scientific review, it needs to be accepted by the scientific society, which I believe is kind of slow. In my observation. So even though if you have proof, if somebody doesn't accept you, there's nothing you can do, they won't accept you. That's where the argument stops, and we're not wasting our time trying to make a point here. Bring out your machine and produce. Dan Winter has a stuff that farmers buy for agricultural purposes. The strawberries are bigger, the yield is like increased by 30%. I bought that too, a shower head that kind of implodes and spins the water and brings it back to its natural structure. And I'm being successful with what I do. I have more yield in my Ormus, and without it I have less. So I don't even need to make a video. I'm convinced. I tested it, it works. Same things like I see a vacuum cleaner, they say you never need to change your filters. It always has a power suction. I bought that vacuum cleaner, I looked at it, I tested it, and it works. So I don't need to be convinced. And that's how you do and investigate your stuff and come to your own conclusions. So now, here's Dr. Luc Montagnier, who's actually the guy who found the HIV retrovirus. So this guy found out if you put human DNA in a vial, in a test tube, and then fill with water, and then add human DNA, and then you have another vial and you have nothing in the water. So when you measure it, there's no evidence of human material, no cell tissue, no nothing. And then, of course, it's a process of 30 or 40 years of going through science, looking at different scientific experiments. He used the Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz, and was sending an electromagnetic signal through the vial with the DNA information. So the other vial, not touching this vial, after 18 or 19 hours, you have to read about the experiment, Google it, don't believe anything, do your own research. Human DNA starts to form, so the primordial soup thing, that theory is out the window, and DNA happens, meaning life is produced as Earth resonates the Schumann resonance into life, biological life forms. This is how planets work. I don't need to be convinced, I understand it. So Dr. Luc Montagnier has presented his findings to the UN and to the scientific society. What happens? Debunkers, critics, he's not accepted. So back to France, he's being funded now and working with these experiments, and they're testing what does that mean if the healthy Schumann resonance goes through something that's biological, affecting something that doesn't have the biological information, and the formation of biological life actually appears seemingly alchemically out of nowhere. And that principle will be brought to fruition in the future, and maybe in 50 years, and that's my point, the scientific review and the UN and the officials accept that, and then everybody says this is actually to be true. But we already have it, it's working, and debunkers want to say that this is all a hoax, it's not really real. I have a problem with that because it hinders the process of us progressing. So again, common sense. Then I also have to say, like, if you're not in the field, you just regurgitate headlines to get clickbait. I've seen debunkers that have little to next to no networks with channels. Like my channel is like 10 years old as YouTube, over 3 million lifetime views. That requires work, and then people come with these 5-minute channels and low networks and use headlines for clickbait. Also, it's a very sad story that I have to hear that. So for our starseeds, find your orientation to not listen to those people who are very quick to say what's a hoax and what's not a hoax. If you have no scientific evidence or can show any model or a proof of concept, I can't really listen to criticism because it doesn't make sense. There is the theory of critics and the practical application. If you cannot build a better car, you can't really, in my opinion, you can't criticize for it because you're not actually the one getting your hands dirty, working the job. Look at minor networks, how they attack major networks, and look at how major networks never attack. Like, I've realized the intelligence of people that are richer, that work for their money, and I'm talking from those from the ground up, they don't go on attacking. But people that have less money always attack the ones with more money. So that's a deficit here that's being incanted that also needs healing. Then we have the gray area, where people just snatch headlines, have no evidence, and use all types of theory to say I'm a starseed for the following reason, but there's no proof of concept. It's just a regurgitated and copy. We got to watch out for those, because they won't have any company successful. No, there's nothing. What's being produced, and if it's frying pans, then I look at your product. But if you talk about the theoretical concept of producing that, then to me you have actually zilch. So that makes you suspicious. Prophecy. Okay, before we go to science fact and science fiction, prophecy is what the natives, again, look at the ancients, what they have said. The time will come when everybody is going to be at everybody, warring. So even in the esoteric industry, what I have witnessed, and I'm not naming names, don't plagiarize without using a reference. What I'm using here, I merely read in newspaper, scientific magazines. I listen to a plethora of speakers that use topics. So I'm inspired by Wilcock, Linda Moulton Howe, Dan Winter, many others that I find in the field that find stuff where I can biophotons, and you get a book on biophotons and read something of a scientist that nobody has ever heard of, but there are scientific tests and studies how photons traverse the universe, that now they realize photon is not a massless particle. The theory is changing. They think that a photon is actually physical. So things are changing also. It's fluid, so I leave myself open to, okay, things can change. Also the atomic structures and the ideas of subatoms, subatomic structures, and Higgs particles as theoretical concepts that we lean on to find our way until we have physical data and physical proof. Then you have, in the prophecy, basically it will say everything's going to be revealed, where people will plagiarize from one another, attack one another, copyright, lawsuits, and businesses will be shut down and not work. And you just have to look at, this one works and this one doesn't work. And you'll make your pick with actually what works. You know, science fiction is what if I say I have my six-dimensional self integrated that can levitate in Lemuria, but not right now, and you're not ready to see me, well, that's science fiction, because am I levitating right now? No. I have heard gurus and others that claim they can bilocate. If you can bilocate, I'm here, I'm open, show me. If you have a Tesla motor or a magnetic motor that will run, and I say that I save money, I'll pay. If you have a concept that it's workable, I will invest and I'll buy, and I'll show the people that it works. But yet I have seen nobody being able to demonstrate those magical powers and treats and do those things. But I know star seeds such as Lea Capitelli, Tracy Taylor, Krista Reiser, myself, Awaken 5D, and others that have phenomenal skills that people with that age in school couldn't bring forth, where I know there's something different, there's something changing, there's intelligence being presented where it's like, okay, I have to sit myself down. Is this past you know, what's this guy, Randy, the magician debunker guy, to show if you can move objects. It's not about that. It's about what skill do you have and what can we do with that skill at that moment in time, and how essential is that for raising the level of consciousness and us getting smarter. What do we have here? Yeah, German science, which brings me to wrap it up. Let me see what time we have. Yeah, to the Nazca mummies, where everybody attacked it. It's a hoax and it's crap. So the main mummy they found, the three-fingered being, the female, where the Nazca lines are, it is real to me for the following reason. I listened to Erich von Däniken when he had an annual meeting with his scientific group, followers and synchronizers and resonators. When Erich von Däniken explained how they found those mummies, I started listening. So those people that came out a year ago saying it's a hoax, that it's all fabricated and put together, all of this, first off, many of those hoax videos are hoaxes themselves, because they just copy-paste the JPEGs and fabricated their own articles. They never touched the mummies. They're not in the field. So here's what Erich explained in German. I think he never explained that in English. At least I have not heard that. But see, Germans are very thorough when it comes to scientific studies and evidence. They're not playing. So they would say that Americans are kind of flighty, and sometimes they add fictional and stories, and that the Americans are very gullible. Germans are very conservative, very serious, and if your stuff is not 100,000% airtight and proof, then you have nothing actually to impress nobody. So 12 different institutions have checked that main body. I don't know about the little bodies, but what I can see, what I conclude from my observation with my own intelligence and my own freedom is that the anatomic structure is one. They can tell when it's fabricated and things are attached that don't belong to the body by shading of the bone structure. They can see the gray patterns, and they can see the age and the anatomic structure. You can't really fabricate it by, making bones that you just cut into pieces and wrap some skin around it and put it in the ground and then x-ray it, and it's going to look real, because it's not going to look real. It won't. So all the hoaxes on x-ray will pop up like night and day. So one thing you have to consider, when you find an organism that is not from this planet, you don't really know what genetic markers are you looking for, because you have nothing else to compare that to but what you find on Earth and how big your database on Earth is, okay? Can we agree? So people coming out with saying this is a hoax the minute it's released had not had any DNA, any revenue, any example, any database, or any reference to claim it is so. It took over a year, so DNA and Gattaca code sequencing takes time. So the hoaxers knew the evidence before science could even go anywhere to show if there is anything. So that is like jumping the gun way too early, not having no proof, nothing relevant, nothing critical to really prove that this is a hoax. To me, this mummy is real because 12 different institutions agree on this is an anatomic construct that is a being that had bigger eyes, that the anatomic structure of that being is different. It was mummified, dipped in diatomaceous earth. The skin, which they can see in the back, is kind of like lizardy. So they're not sure, you know what I'm saying? They're not really sure of what are we dealing with here? The DNA that they have found and compared amongst one another, and it's an ongoing process. And not to worship Gaia, but thank you for investing in those mummies. The deal is also that these people that found those mummies didn't want to get caught, because you go to jail if you rob a grave unannounced and you have no permit. So this was all done in hiding. And if there was nothing to hide, why hide? Why not all out in the open? And so what I heard is that they contacted Erich von Däniken and they were trying to sell it to him, and he was thinking either this is the biggest hoax in human history or the biggest find in human history. And then he addressed to Gaia TV to go out there and investigate. And I think a few people went down there and they were basically funding the project. I don't know, maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million. I can only say thank you for bringing that forth and bringing it to our attention. And this costs money to run sequences. And then they ran the DNA sequence taken from the being. So if it's a hoax, the DNA would be diluted. If it's fabricated, you're not even getting any DNA, okay? It's impossible. You can't pick let's say a dog bone, chisel it into a human hip bone, and then you get human DNA. That's impossible, okay? Can we agree on that? So, for you to make sense and open your mind that we already found an extraterrestrial being that is mummified. And according to ancient history, there are graves on this planet where extraterrestrial beings were buried, and they're protected because they didn't want the human race to find them unless they're ready. So it makes no sense for wild people finding that and then destroying the evidence, saying this doesn't exist. We've seen it in the movie Stargate, when Stargate opens an ancient gate and comes into a society they're human-like, they also speak English, and they want to debunk everything that has to do with that artifact that's there. Everything is off limits, and it's militarized and protected, and they have a problem with that they from the other side opened it, because that would have to end a war they have with another faction that believes in the Stargate, and it believes that they are offspring, like we are God's offspring, I say. and it would kill the entire religious and political system of the people. And it's depicted in a show in Stargate. Funny, I have to really laugh about these concepts because it's evident of what's actually happening on Earth. Makes sense? So back to the Nazca mummies. If you haven't watched it on Gaia, Nazca Unearthed, watch it. So the DNA that they extracted from the mummy, and a year later, were they now getting the evidence? The hoaxers, they basically travel into the future and then come back and they already know everything. That's why these hoaxers on debunkers are ridiculous. This is not for sensationalism and hype. And yes, I know some are stage jockeys. You know, they rub their own chest. I'm the biggest, I'm the baddest, I'm the incarnation of I don't know what. You know, I'm like, you know, it's we all need to take a chili bean, a chill pill, and calm down from this high horse. And the bigger they come, the harder they fall, my mom says. So I look at the evidence, and the scientific evidence shows that 12 different chemical labs conclude that the DNA extracted from that being is not from this planet. They ran DNA sequences against plethora of hundreds of thousands of Gattaca codes. Nothing matches. So they know that DNA, there's no earthly origin of that DNA. So that species, and one of the species they found eggs. We know that penguins can lay eggs. So we know something of that nature biologically is possible. So there's also a storyline to these beings where Erich explained in German with Sir German accent. That there was a similar race being described. I don't know if they found bodies in Tibet that, according to the texts that they have found, crashed with a vessel. They couldn't fix the vessel, and natives that lived there, and this is just like you gotta look at us, killed them off. They didn't look like them. They were a threat, and everybody got killed, and a few survivors made it to the other side. How? We don't know. But we have cases like this to this day where we have to scratch our heads and come to conclusions where debunkers are like really left in the cold. Because if you don't know about Gattaca coding and sequencing, and you're not a scientist yourself, or can prove with your probing that it would be non-conclusive, you have nothing but you running your mouth, running your lip, wanting to debunk something, and you're not really constructive, you're not really helping. So there are tribes in the Amazon jungle where if you want to go near them, they'll kill you, because we're demons to them, understandably. Now imagine higher civilization, you know, they crash, things go wrong. And I'm not even breaking down the dimensionality of Earth and things that can happen, and there are gaps here. We kill it off. We don't allow intelligence. Things that work. Oh my God! Somebody, a friend of mine, you know, who helped me, assisted me in healing my Lyme disease out, which no doctor could cure. They said there is no cure, and then they said I'm clear, and then I realized I have a dormant. After he fixed 2,000 people, the government approached him and said, "You are a fraud. You know, you're claiming these things. This is impossible. You can't do what you're doing." And they got certified, 2,000 letters notarized, signed by all the clients that they actually healed, so they couldn't touch the guy. So you see how I have a problem with people resisting those who put in the work, actually trying to find what's going on. So cattle mutilation is very real. I don't believe that extraterrestrials are behind it. I believe high-tech military personnel is spooking the hell out of us. They have some technology to impress us, but the royal ships, and I will do another video on that, they come holographically. They don't need to touch, cut, or probe anything. Not even necessary. Lower dimensional stuff. And I agree with Bashar said to a famous investigator, as the greatest problem and threat to this planet right now is not your reptilians and all of this other stuff that's I'm adding this. is the humans with their stuff attacking themselves, one another, warring fractions, fighting, weaponry. We produce weapons, we produce atomic powers, atomic bombs. It's us. Nobody else does that. And the blame goes back to here. And that's why starseeds like me and others in many forms come back to this planet and say, use your mind, think for yourself. Do not go for the aggressive. Debunkers attack everything that walks and has a name. They don't go towards the little guy, they need the big guy because they need clickbait. That's why the debunkers now officially have been debunked by me. They have nothing. Unless I see somebody put something on the table that is impressive, that can increase agriculture or make America fertilizer free, I'm not impressed. I'm impressed by people with scientific evidence that bring forth stuff like with their own studies. I respect their studies. For people are 20 or 30 years in the field, comparing stuff, looking at notes, making look at science that has been found. I say I bow, respect. That's what we should investigate and look at and take in consideration to come to a common denominator, to make Earth the medium that it can assist us to expand ourselves so we may attain the allowance to become an interstellar species. On that note, Ra for president. Thank you. See you on the flip side.